Morning, it's 9:30 on Monday the 10th of July. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Pep Turner. I was going to call it something else.
We're still getting used to that. Now, thank you for joining us this morning. There's a lot to get through. A BBC household name accused of paying a teenager for explicit pictures has been suspended, and the Met Police are now looking into the claims. What does this mean for the future of the BBC? Have they handled this badly? Have you lost trust in our public service broadcaster?
It is a mess, isn't it? President Joe Biden, he's in the UK. He's going to meet Rishi Sunak in Downing Street. That'll be in our time on Britain's Newsroom. Then he's going to meet the King in Windsor Castle for tea, and they're going to talk about the environment.
And talking of the environment, Just Stop Oil have officially distanced themselves from the confetti-throwing woman, I think it was a woman, who appeared at George Osborne's wedding in Somerset on Saturday. These protests have taken a different twist.
Yeah, they said it wasn't them, but they haven't. But they've endorsed the sentiment of what she did, which was nasty and vicious. It was a wedding, for heaven's sake. What's next? A funeral?
Awful. And actually, to target an individual, I think was completely wrong. Let us know your thoughts on everything we're discussing this morning. GBNews at gbnews.com is the email address. But first of all, here is your latest news with Aaron Armstrong.
Hello there, very good morning to you. 9:34 here in the GB Newsroom. The US President will meet the Prime Minister this morning for discussions about Ukraine. The UK is one of several allies to question Joe Biden's decision to supply Kyiv with controversial cluster munitions for its war against Russia. The leaders also have differing views over Ukraine's bid to join NATO. Both will attend the NATO Leaders Summit in Lithuania on Tuesday. Later today, President Biden will have tea with the King at Windsor Castle to discuss climate change. The BBC is due to meet the police later to discuss allegations one of its male presenters paid a 17-year-old £35,000 for sexually explicit images. The corporation yesterday announced it had suspended the unnamed star almost 2 months after a complaint was first made by the alleged victim's family. The BBC says allegations of a different nature came to light last week. It is a crime to make or possess indecent images of anyone under 18. Shareholders in Thames Water have agreed to provide a further £750 million worth of funding in an attempt to stave off nationalisation. The utility giant, though, has warned £2.5 billion more will be needed by 2030 as it struggles under £14 billion worth of debt. The latest funding deal comes amid government contingency plans to take control of the firm if it collapses. Thames Water is the UK's biggest supplier, serving 15 million households across the South East. The government says significant progress has been made in providing better support for rape victims. However, campaigners say it's too early to tell. The Home Office and the Ministry of Justice claim a progress report published today shows the number of police referrals and cases reaching court have been restored to 2016 levels ahead of schedule. The report comes as police across England and Wales implement a new approach to dealing with rape and other serious sexual offences. More on all of our stories in our later bulletins and more on our website, gbnews.com. Right now, back to Andrew and Bev.
Well, it's an extraordinary story. The BBC suspended one of its male TV presenters, a household name, after paying a teenager £35,000, apparently for sexually explicit images. The police are involved and the BBC is facing serious questions over how it's handled it.
Police officers will meet with representatives from the BBC today about the incident, but they've said they've not yet received a formal allegation.
We're speaking to GB News. The Justice Secretary, Alex Chalk, forgive me, says an investigation is needed quickly.
Well, I think the first thing to say, these are really serious and really concerning allegations, and they need to be investigated quickly. Now, in the fullness of time, maybe there will be a consideration as to how this was dealt with. I think the important thing now, however, is that these matters are investigated, whether that's within the BBC, but also potentially by the police, if indeed that's what the police decide to do. So there's a meeting today, as I understand it. I think we now need to give them the space for that to take place. So I think we don't want to be giving a running commentary at this stage. As I say, in the fullness of time, no doubt there'll need to be a consideration about how this has all been handled. But right now, they should have the time and the space to investigate these serious and concerning matters.
We're going to be speaking to our regular commentator, Piers Pottinger, in just a moment. But first of all, let's speak to former BBC correspondent Michael Cole. Good morning, Michael. Thank you for joining us. You worked at the BBC for many years. What are the key questions now that you think should be asked of the BBC?
Good morning, Beverly. Good morning, Andrew. Well, the BBC, as we all know, is very bureaucratic. It's unwieldy. It usually does the right thing eventually, which is what Winston Churchill said of America. And it has at last done the right thing in calling in the Metropolitan Police, which it should have done as soon as it became aware of these very grave charges, because if proven, they would carry sentences ranging from 10 to 14 years under the 1978 Protection of Children Act and other changes to the criminal code. So I'm afraid that an internal investigation by the BBC, and I've seen some of them pan out, usually unsatisfactorily, because they're too little and too late, won't do in this case. It has to be handed over to the police because these are grave errors if they have been committed. Indeed, they are felonies. And it will not do for Tim Davie to issue concerned statements as he has done so far. This has to be taken by the scruff of the neck. It has to be worked out. And bringing in the police is the first sensible thing the BBC has done.
Tim Davie, he's the Director General, Michael, and the BBC have suspended this individual. Is the reason they've suspended this individual now because it's hit the press? Because the complaint was made in the middle of May by the individual's mother.
Indeed, that's right. That should have set the alarm bells ringing. Quite clearly it didn't. The BBC says that then the complaint altered materially last Thursday, and that's when Tim Davie should have been informed. Well, he should have been informed at the outset, because the BBC has been beset by recent scandals involving their chairman and so on. We all know about them. And of course, in the not that distant past, we've had the terrible scandals of Rolf Harris and even worse, Jimmy Savile. So it hasn't got a great track record of how to deal with these sort of things, which then, rather like a small cloud on the horizon, can turn into a thunderstorm if they're not dealt with in the right way from the outset. But as I say, they're not light on their feet on these occasions, and then it becomes very bureaucratic, and then it becomes very much more defensive. There's no reason why, from the outset, they should not, having informed the person who is accused of doing these things, and we must stress, of course, that an allegation is not proof, having informed him that this allegation had been made by a concerned mother, then at that stage, the sensible thing, having spoken to their own lawyers, would have been to inform the Metropolitan Police. Let them take it from there. Then the BBC's hands are clean to some extent.
And should they not have immediately taken this person off air?
Yeah, well, it's a judgment call. We haven't heard all the circumstances, and as I've said, an allegation is not proof. The detail here will be crucial. We need to know what the allegation was, but I think it was absolutely right that they did not name him and has not named him, and they shouldn't do that because it would hopelessly and endlessly prejudice any further legal action, should there be legal action taken in due course. So it's difficult, but I think a firm hand was needed from the outset, somebody who knew what they was doing. It's not as if they haven't had experience of this. They've been around the track several days, and it also sometimes seems as a week cannot go past without there's another BBC scandal. And don't forget, we all pay through that through a disguised poll tax called the licence fee.
Do they not have a responsibility, Michael, to the other presenters and staff, though, who are trying desperately, who have been over the weekend, to try and clear their names and distance themselves from any allegations?
I can understand that. Yeah, Beverly, I can understand that entirely. The shadow falls across everybody, and it's most unfair. And some of them, wisely or not, have taken the steps to say, hey, it's not me. I understand that. But of course, the other people who resent this are the ordinary members of staff who aren't paid these stratospheric salaries. And they look at this happening at the higher level and they see people who they probably resent because they get so much more money for doing essentially the same job that they could do quite easily if they were not on the staff. And they don't like it either. So a firm hand is needed here. Sometimes you feel this great ship of state sailing down Portland Place, there's nobody at the tiller.
Michael, thank you for that. That's Michael Cole, the former BBC correspondent. Piers Pottinger is with us, our favourite political advisor. Piers, you've advised all sorts of institutions, all sorts of individuals who've been embroiled in scandal. If you were advising the BBC today, what would you be telling them to do?
Well, I actually used to advise the BBC when the great Michael Grade was in charge.
Yeah.
Now, of course, he's running Ofcom,
He is.
who must also be watching this very closely. And the other person who we haven't talked about, and no one seems to have mentioned, is the brand new acting chairman.
You're right.
Who is Dame Stevens, and she was only appointed on the 27th of June. And she's 75, and she is a communications expert from Aberystwyth University.
Yeah.
So hopefully she's got a grasp of how to communicate this.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I do agree with Beverly. I think
she came in because the previous chairman resigned over undeclared...
That was
Richard Sharp.
another scandal.
Yeah.
And he was a very experienced city operator who I think might have actually been quite good in these circumstances because clearly this is the chairman has to take charge of this very rapidly, if not, I mean, why it hasn't happened already, I don't know. But I do feel for the other staff because the cloud over them. Yeah. And when they say, sometimes, as Michael Cole quite rightly said, perhaps foolishly, it's not me, Gov, people then get more suspicious.
Oh, who is it?
And it's very difficult. And the question of anonymity is interesting. I think this probably came because the laws have certainly got tighter and stronger since Cliff Richard, for example, when the police famously raided his house while he was in Portugal, and they put it on television and said it was Cliff Richard's house.
Which was appalling.
Which was utterly dreadful and still affects him to this day.
Sold the house.
But here we have a terrible story about a concerned mother and her child, and now we have another concerned mother as the chairman of the BBC. And I think swiftness is the key to this. This needs to be sorted out quickly. There doesn't need to be a long investigation. We're talking about a pretty straightforward one set of allegations, unless there are more about this person, one doesn't know. I mean, look what happened with Jimmy Savile and Rolf Harris. It started with one and built up, and one hopes that there isn't more of this horrific allegation to come. And if it is proven, it needs to be swiftly dealt with and referred to the police, and the person in question, there's no doubt about it, that person's career is over.
Doesn't it say a lot about the BBC that they only suspended this person? We're using the words very carefully because we know who it is, but it's not for us to name this person. They only suspended this person 2 days after it hit the press.
Absolutely.
Would they have suspended this person otherwise?
And again, you have to question the procedures, as they call them, human resources, I still call it personnel, procedures for when a complaint is lodged of this severity about one of their very highest profile presenters. They really need to look at the process. And I think Tim Davies' job is on the line.
She's the Director General.
And the acting chairman, although she's a woman, chairman actually means hand on the chair. It's nothing to do with male or female.
Quite.
But she also needs to be seen to be in charge and grasping the nettle and sorting this out swiftly as possible, because trust in the BBC is now at an all-time low.
I think you made a really good point earlier, Andrew, about the fact that this sort of ambiguity about the taking, the procurement of, and the possession and the distribution of images, that actually that is under 18. This is where there's some confusion, because there's actually no suggestion that the alleged victim and the alleged perpetrator have ever met.
No.
It is just merely about the exchange of explicit images. And of course, this started when this alleged victim was 17 years old. Now, maybe the mother, you were saying, maybe she didn't take it to the police because she didn't realise.
Think any law had been broken, because you would think 17, the person
the age of
is an age of consent.
But it isn't.
So they go to the papers in desperation because they've said to the BBC, stop it, stop it, stop it. Apparently the payments continued, and worse for mum, the person continued to appear on TV.
In relation to these allegations, if you're under 18... that's the key point.
Even if the individual gave consent, it's still against the law because they're under 18. So
that's right.
It's a clear prima facie breach, if indeed what we're told has happened.
Indeed. And again, one has to bear in mind, these are allegations. We don't know anything about the person who's making these allegations. And one has to remember that the Sun, owned by the Murdoch empire, Murdoch and the BBC have hardly had cordial relations over the years. And they are very, very competitive with each other.
Can I ask you a question, though, as somebody that works for a national newspaper? The Sun must believe this is true.
Oh, absolutely.
They wouldn't have...
You would have lawyers going over every detail. I don't know if they've seen the transactions, the financial statements, but I imagine the mother would have to have given a newspaper like that serious evidence.
I think they have seen the statements.
I think they have.
And, of course, as you quite rightly say, the lawyers will have gone over every single word of everything the Sun has written about this, because it is a landmine they're nearly treading on.
And there's been no denial so far. I mean, it is an extraordinary story. I mean, I've been doing this job a long time. Piers, you've been advising a lot of... This is a jaw-dropper, isn't it?
It is a jaw-dropper, partly because, unfortunately, as you said earlier, we all know who the person that is... The alleged person is, and that's why it is so jaw-dropping. And when the general public know, there will be absolute outrage.
Do you know what I think the most jaw-dropping thing is? It's yet another example of a male... we know it's a male presenter.
It's always a male. It's never a woman.
It's never a woman, funnily enough. But who thinks that they could get away with it, especially when you're talking about hard evidence, photographs, bank transactions. What goes through a person's mind to think that they the arrogance, the untouchability, to think that they could have such a backlog of evidence that gives a newspaper the confidence to do this and get away with it?
You have to wonder about the mental stability of the person in question.
I think so.
And that also leads on to, if that person was clearly mentally unstable, why was that person given such a prominent role in such a position of trust?
And of course, one of the many aspects of this story is the person involved, the individual, according to the mum, was using the money to get deeper and deeper into illegal drugs.
I mean, it's horrific. Absolutely
so awful.
Horrific.
So awful.
And I mean, when the story broke, I couldn't believe it initially. And now I don't think anyone in Britain can really believe it. And when they know the name of the person, they really won't believe it.
Well, I think the clock is ticking on the BBC, actually, to name this person.
We're going to keep them to you because we want to talk to you a little bit about Windham before the half an hour's over.
Right, we just received pictures of US President Joe Biden leaving his residence for his meeting with Rishi Sunak this morning. Our royal correspondent Cameron Walker joins us now to give us the latest. Good morning, Cameron.
Well, we think he's going to join us. There he is.
Between the Prime Minister... Oh, hello.
We're with you.
Can you hear me?
Sorry,
we
Cameron.
Can, Cameron. You're at Windsor. You're at Windsor.
Perfect.
Start again. We missed the start of your report there.
I'm at Windsor, yes. No worries, yes. So as you said, you've just seen pictures of the President en route to number 10 Downing Street to meet the Prime Minister. Following that meeting, the President will be heading here to Windsor Castle to meet the King, and the red carpet has very much been rolled out. And in fact, anticipation and excitement has really been building since Thursday here in this town, because US military helicopters were spotted flying over the castle in an apparent rehearsal for President Biden's visit. but we have military on display here. In the quadrangle of Windsor Castle, the King will be meeting the President of the United States, and then the Welsh Guards will be providing a guard of honour. The band of the Welsh Guards will play the US national anthem as well. There'll be an opportunity for both the King and President Biden to inspect that guard of honour, and they will watch a military march past as well. Then the King and the President will go inside the castle for a cup of tea, because of course we're British, so that's what we do here. And they are going to also be meeting financial and philanthropic leaders from both the UK and the US, who are meeting inside Windsor Castle this morning from the Climate Finance Mobilisation Forum, which is looking at ways to help developing nations tackle the challenges of climate change. And the King and the President are going to be hearing about the work they have been doing. Of course, it's a cause which the King has cared about for decades, really, as has President Biden. But it is the first time that the King is meeting President Biden since his coronation. But of course, it wasn't the President at the coronation. It was Jill Biden, the First Lady of the United States. And presidents and critics even of the President suggested that this was a bit of a snub by President Biden for not attending the coronation. In actual fact, it was more just following traditions and customs, really, because no sitting US president has attended the coronation of a British monarch. The President was here in September to attend a reception at Buckingham Palace on the eve of the late Queen's funeral, and of course he attended the funeral as well. So it's still kind of strengthening that British and US special relationship. But it is just a fleeting visit here to the UK for President Biden, because it's just really a stopover, because he's going to be flying to Lithuania a little bit later on today to attend the NATO summit.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm sure that President Biden probably arrived on one little aeroplane, not kicking out any gas.
And his motorcade peers there'll probably be about 14 cars in the motorcade as he talks to the King about the environment.
Many more.
Do you remember when Clinton came here? Half
Yes.
the motorcade got stuck on one side of Tower Bridge, half on the other, because the bridge opened. And they got half of them were stuck. It was extraordinary.
Yes. And we don't see Just Stop Oil protesters.
No, they won't get too close to that, will they?
No.
Relations aren't great, though, between Biden and Rishi Sunak.
Well, Biden is most anti-British president for many years and has made this, being photographed with Jerry Adams.
Not coming over for the coronation.
Not coming for the coronation. And when Rishi Sunak went to Belfast to greet him, instead of acknowledging him, Biden went and hugged a random stranger in the crowd.
Probably didn't know who he was.
Almost snubbing Rishi, who he can't get right.
Here's the motorcade, so we can start counting. That's we've seen the tail end, but let me tell you, it'll be huge.
Like a prison van.
And they're going to argue today as well about cluster bombs, because the President wants to use cluster bombs.
Again, I mean, this is very it's sort of conflicting policy. On the one hand, he wants to stop Ukraine joining NATO, and there is a reason for that, and I understand it, because if they join NATO, then the whole of NATO would technically be at war with Russia, which but he's against even saying that they will definitely be invited once the war is over, which, in my view, they should be invited. But the cluster bombs, which 123 countries have signed up to say they don't want because they cause such horrible devastation, particularly well after an event. They lie dormant. It's the unexploded bomblets, as they're called, which kill children and innocent civilians. And so the real, what that signifies is that perhaps Ukraine is not doing as well in the war as we might think. And they are suffering from lack of ammunition, lack of equipment, and the fast way of shoring this up is to give them the cluster bombs, which, whilst I think everyone is against, it's probably the only solution at the moment until they get proper armament.
Well, we've got live pictures, which we'll bring back on the screen. This is outside of number 10. We're waiting for Joe Biden to arrive there at any moment.
Sleepy Joe.
You know what struck me, Piers, with these cluster bombs, of course, because they are not dissimilar to the landmines that have been used in previous conflicts, which Princess Diana became a passionate advocate of not using landmines. It'd be quite nice if maybe Prince Harry came out and said that he doesn't support Biden's decision to drop cluster bombs. He won't do that, though, will he? Because it's the Democrats.
Well, I think anything Prince Harry says is a cluster bomb in its own way. I mean,
and on that bombshell,
the people it offends is widespread and it causes long-lasting damage.
He won't have even thought of it either.
No. Right, we
We've
need
got
to
to move on.
Piers,
Thank you for coming in. We didn't get to talk about Wimbledon, which is a pity.
Yeah, still to come this morning. There are more reaction to the reputational damage facing the BBC. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel. It's 10 a.m. on Monday the 10th of July. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce.
Joe Biden, the President of the United States, he's in Britain. He's meeting Rishi Sunak in Downing, so we're expecting him there any moment now. We'll bring you that as it happens here on GB News, Britain's Newsroom.
Is the BBC's reputation in tatters? One of the broadcaster's presenters has been accused of paying a teenager for explicit pictures and has been suspended. The Met Police are now looking into the claims. What does it mean for the future of the BBC that you pay for?
And just up all, they've officially distanced themselves from the confetti-throwing idiot who appeared at George Osborne's wedding in Somerset on Saturday. Are these protests going too far? And while they've distanced themselves, they nevertheless agree with the sentiment.
We'd love to know your thoughts on all of our stories this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. But first of all, here is the very latest news with Aaron Armstrong.
Good morning. It is 2 minutes past 10. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB Newsroom. The US President is on his way to meet the Prime Minister at Downing Street for discussions about Ukraine. The UK is one of several allies to question Joe Biden's decision to supply Kyiv with controversial cluster munitions for its war against Russia. Now, the leaders also have differing views over Ukraine's bid to join NATO. Later today, President Biden will have tea with the King at Windsor Castle to discuss climate change. The BBC is due to meet the police later to discuss claims one of its male presenters paid a 17-year-old for sexually explicit images. The corporation yesterday announced it had suspended the unnamed star following allegations in The Sun he'd paid the teenager £35,000 for the photos. It came almost 2 months after a complaint was first made by the alleged victim's family. The BBC says allegations of a different nature came to light last week. The Justice Secretary, Alex Chalk, told GB News the broadcaster must hold an urgent investigation.
These are really serious and really concerning allegations, and they need to be investigated quickly. Now, in the fullness of time, maybe there will be a consideration as to how this was dealt with. I think the important thing now, however, is that these matters are investigated, whether that's within the BBC, but also potentially by the police, if indeed that's what the police decide to do.
Shareholders in Thames Water have agreed to provide a further £750 million in funding in an attempt to stave off nationalisation. The utility giant, though, has warned it needs another £2.5 billion by 2030. It is struggling under a huge amount of debt. The latest funding deal comes amid government contingency plans to take control of the firm if it collapses. Thames Water is the UK's biggest supplier, serving 15 million households across the southeast. Thousands of holidaymakers are facing disruption this summer after EasyJet cancelled around 1,700 flights, blaming air traffic control delays in Europe. Most of the cancelled flights are from Gatwick, and the airline says 95% of affected passengers have been booked onto alternative routes, while air traffic controllers in Europe have threatened to strike over the next 6 months, but they have yet to confirm dates. Labour's promising to create jobs and reduce household bills in plans it says will benefit millions of tradespeople across the country. Labour claims its National Warm Homes plan to provide better insulation for 19 million households will reduce energy bills by up to £500 a year. Now, the aim is to create long-term, highly paid jobs for skilled workers. The Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray, told GB News the retrofitting plans will save people money.
Really important thing about doing this insulation programme, this retrofit programme, is that firstly it saves people money. It brings down the average household bill by £500, by up to £500 permanently. That's an investment to make sure those bills come down. But it also creates jobs. It creates job opportunities for up to 4 million people across the country. People with skills such as roofers, glaziers, plumbers, mechanics, and so on. And so it helps with the economic growth that we've been so sorely lacking for the last 13 years.
The government claims significant progress has been made in providing better support for rape victims, but campaigners say it's too early to tell. The Home Office and the Ministry of Justice believe a progress report published today proves the number of police referrals and cases reaching court have been restored to 2016 levels, ahead of schedule. The report comes as police across England and Wales implement a new approach to dealing with rape and other serious sexual offences. Stephen Lawrence's mother says she's profoundly concerned about the slow pace of police reforms. In a letter to the Home Secretary, Baroness Lawrence says she supports measures including the automatic dismissal of officers charged or convicted of serious crimes and officers who fail vetting. The Met Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, has said he believes there are hundreds of corrupt officers in the force who should not be serving. The head of Russia's army has been seen for the first time since the Wagner Group's short-lived rebellion 2 weeks ago. Valery Gerasimov appeared in footage released by Russia's Defence Ministry. This is on state TV, meeting top generals and heads of military intelligence. Now, the leader of the Wagner Group has fiercely criticised Gerasimov and called for him to be handed over before last month's attempted mutiny. A flash flood emergency has been declared in parts of New York after hours of heavy rain left people stranded in their homes and vehicles.
Up to my knees!
Well, almost a foot of rain fell in some areas where residents were told to move to higher ground and to avoid travelling. More rain is forecast, with authorities in the state of New England warning of potential catastrophic flash floods, and the first ever high-risk warnings been issued for parts of Vermont. Now, this is GB News, more as it happens, but now it is back to Bev and Andrew.
So Joe Biden is on his way to Downing Street. He might be there by now to meet the Prime Minister ahead of a later NATO summit in Lithuania.
Well, joining us from Downing Street this morning is our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, morning. Has the entourage arrived yet?
It hasn't, but as you can see, they have rolled out the red carpet here, Andrew, and everyone's terribly excited because Larry the Cat, who is normally, it must be said, frankly, and I've covered many of these occasions, at the centre of attention, has come out to pose for the photographers. He is incredibly cute. I don't think anyone can deny that. We're expecting President Biden. We're told around 10:30, so maybe about 10-15 minutes away. And it is going to be interesting. This is the 5th time that him and Rishi Sunak have met in as many months. It's the 6th time, Downing Street tell us, since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister back in the autumn. I think it's fair to say both of them, who've spent quite a lot of time together, even without officials, do get on personally quite well. But there are a few cracks, it must be said, in the UK-US special relationship at the moment. Now, overall, things are pretty steady, pretty strong, particularly when it comes to Ukraine. But we saw that announcement, didn't we, over the weekend about using cluster bombs. It's something that the UK and other NATO allies are not in favour of. They believe it contravenes UN conventions. The United States' argument is that ultimately this is needed because Ukraine is running out of ammunition and this is a good option, and that Russia, frankly, has used a hell of a lot of cluster bombs over the last 500 days or so. Added to that, there's a few other disagreements on who should be the next NATO Secretary General. It is a bit of a pantomime here. Someone's taken Larry inside. But they're disagreeing about who's going to be the next NATO Secretary General. Ben Wallace, clearly the UK Defence Secretary, is the UK's first choice in that, though it seems that that is not President Biden's choice, rather Ursula von der Leyen. So there's a little bit of disagreement on that. And also then about whether Ukraine should be allowed to join NATO at all. Now, we know that the UK has come out and been one of the most forceful kind of proponents of Ukraine joining NATO now. That is not where the United States is. President Biden, in an interview yesterday with CNN, suggesting that if Ukraine were allowed to join NATO, it would be after the war has ended. So there are some cracks, it must be said, in that special relationship. I'm sure some of that will be talked about today. But in the end, this will be about smiles, handshakes, posing for the cameras. And ultimately, this is actually about President Biden going to meet the King at Windsor Castle. That's the big occasion happening later on today. Both of these guys, though, will be in Lithuania, in Vilnius tomorrow, at that NATO summit, which starts, as I say, tomorrow morning.
Do we still know why the President chose not to go to the coronation of the King? Every world leader worth their salt was there, but not Biden. He sent the First Lady. Very strange.
Well, so as far as I know about this, there had been a bit of a convention about US presidents not attending the coronation, and that was related back to, obviously, the fact that the United States broke away from the United Kingdom. As far as I know, the US president was not at Queen Elizabeth's coronation either. And I think the main argument, though, from the White House is that President Biden had just been in the country before the coronation. I mean, he's a pretty busy man. On a personal level, I would say this idea that President Biden, I know you guys have been talking about a kind of anti-British. I mean, I think he's met Rishi Sunak more than potentially any other world leader in the last 6 months or so. And clearly he's made a very conscious effort on his way to Vilnius to stop here at Downing Street and at Windsor Castle. Clearly, Rishi Sunak was in the White House only last month. So there is an awful lot of interaction, and actually some people are saying that President Biden does like Rishi Sunak because he's brought an element of stability to UK politics, and particularly to foreign policy, and there's a sense that the US feels that it can do business with the UK again after, frankly, what were a couple of turbulent years with our internal politics.
All right.
Darren McCaffrey, our political.
Thank
Of course,
you, Darren.
relations are so good, but not a prospect of a deal on Brexit.
No.
The United States. He's still at war with the state of Northern Ireland. I think relations are pretty bad, actually.
Yeah, the only thing is they're absolutely united on some of the bigger picture stuff.
Yeah.
They're absolutely united on the whole eco-zealotry, aren't they, and saving the planet. They're united on a greater
zero
surveillance state. They're both united on that. They're united on digital currencies. We've got a central banking digital currency expert coming in a little while, actually, to explain what all of that is about, particularly, and how it sits alongside our amazing GB News campaign, Don't Kill Cash.
Which was doing very well, that campaign. And, of course, as the President of the United States arrives in Downing Street, we will be there live for you. Now, the BBC has suspended a household name male TV presenter accused of paying a teenager £35,000, which would be a breach of the law for sexually explicit images. The contact apparently started when the teenager was 17.
That's right. The state broadcaster is obviously facing huge questions over how it has handled this issue after it confirmed that it first received the complaint in May. As the Sun newspaper reports, the presenter in question then made panicked calls to the teenager last week, aiming to basically stop the investigation.
So police officers are going to meet representatives from the corporation today, which is a real sign this is escalating now, but they say they've not received any formal allegation.
So let's cross to our reporter, Paul Hawkins, who is at Broadcasting House. Paul, the corporation are under huge pressure now, aren't they, from inside and outside, actually, to name the person who has been who's alleged to have carried out these particular acts?
Yeah, I'd say maybe not to name that presenter, because obviously there are defamation laws in place and there is a right to privacy that was enshrined in law after a Supreme Court ruling in 2002 that anyone under investigation by a law enforcement agency has a right to privacy until they are charged. But certainly, Bev, you're right to say that the BBC is under pressure to reveal more about what they knew and when in relation to their ongoing investigation. They've been looking into this since an initial complaint was made on May the 19th. Why wasn't the presenter suspended in the first place? What sort of questions were asked of that presenter? What was the depth and scale of the investigation? And why are they only finding out about further allegations towards the end of last week? There's also a gap that appears to be emerging between what they are saying, how they've handled the investigation, and according to The Sun, anyway, reports in The Sun this morning, how the family feel the investigation has been handled. The family, reported by The Sun, are saying that they were unhappy that they'd not been contacted by the BBC. The BBC are saying that they reached out to the family initially and they received no response. So really, we're in the very early stages of this ongoing investigation, and there's a lot of questions and not many answers, and so easy to speculate, but we should remember that we're all publishers now, and on social media and certainly in journalism we're not going to name any names, and there have been a number of BBC stars that have openly on social media have had to explicitly say, I'm not I'm not the named presenter, with other people screenshotting them and then taking their picture and saying, these are the presenters, this is who it is, and those presenters then say, no, it's not me at all, and you'll be hearing from my lawyer.
Of course, the BBC are scarred, aren't they, over the way they allowed the naming of Cliff Richard when the police raided his home. The BBC put a helicopter in the air at taxpayers' expense to film it all, and there wasn't a shred of evidence against Cliff Richard, who they had to apologise to him. He was very badly emotionally damaged by it. In fact, he sold the house. I don't think he ever set foot in the house again. So the BBC got all this in the background, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the case that springs to mind immediately when we talk about naming people when no charges have been made. And you're absolutely right to point out the Cliff Richard case, and that's why, especially the BBC themselves now, very keen to learn from that lesson, and also that legal ruling that was made at the Supreme Court in 2022. So, yeah, the person isn't going to be named just yet, and we're very keen to avoid that, not just as journalists, but also as all of us in social media groups. We should also add, by the way, it's not just on Twitter and Facebook as well. You've also got to be careful about WhatsApp. This is a very nuanced area of the law, and so even on WhatsApp, which can contain hundreds, sometimes thousands of people in a WhatsApp group, you've got to be very careful about what you write and about implicating people, because as we know, lies can damage reputations.
Absolutely. That's our national reporter, Paul Watkins, outside Broadcasting House.
Do you know, it's so interesting, this story. One of the lines I think that's most shocking from The Sun today is that the family was saying that nobody from the corporation rang them for a proper interview after the initial complaints.
They clearly didn't take it seriously enough.
They didn't, did they? By that, you would think, if I was the mother of this teen...
And that's why she's gone to a national newspaper, because she didn't feel the BBC had taken it seriously.
Yeah.
And some people say, why didn't she go to police? Because I still make the point, she may not have realised any law had been broken. She just thought, rather like the Philip Schofield business at ITV, an inappropriate relationship.
Yes, not necessarily illegal, although if these allegations stand up, then there absolutely was a criminal act. Again, one of the most shocking facts about this is this criminal act could end up being 10 to 14 years in prison, would be the maximum sentence, which is for possessing or distributing images, explicit images of somebody under the age of 18.
The BBC is under siege today, and rightly so, not least for the way they don't appear to have handled this very well. We can talk to entertainment and TV journalist Sarah Robertson. Sarah, I mean, the BBC's lived through some scandals in its time. This appears to be shaping up into one of the bigger ones.
That's correct, Andrew. Good morning to both of you today. It's a real dark day again for the BBC this morning, given the seriousness of the allegations and that the Metropolitan Police are now meeting with the Director General, Tim Davie, to talk about this alleged investigation into one of their household names. This presenter, the accused presenter, is seen as a trusted pair of hands. He's someone who's well respected within audiences, BBC audiences, and it's just absolutely shocking given the seriousness of the allegations. But also what's shocking is, having given the seriousness of those allegations, how the BBC have been very clumsy in their delayed handling of this. There has been this gap, as you've pointed out in the report from The Sun, of when the mother of the complainant went first to the BBC to say, look, can you get this presenter in question to desist sending money to my child? It's helping to fund a drug habit, an alleged drug habit. And the BBC don't seem, according to the mother, don't seem to have followed this up properly or done their due diligence. There seems to have been a gap. The presenter should have been immediately suspended from that point until they could carry out their investigation, but they weren't. They were seen going to parties, to an awards do in June. Living at large is what the Sunday Mirror reported this weekend, with other high-up BBC execs. So you have to question, have the BBC been trying to do a bit of a cover-up here, Bev and Andrew? Have they been trying to protect this household name for fear of what could happen, and hoping that it would all go away? I do think there's been some naivety maybe on the family's part, as you say. They might not have understood the full breadth and depth of the law. Most people don't. But the point is, the BBC should have acted immediately, put the presenter on suspension, done their diligence, their due diligence, started to investigate straight away into this matter, given the seriousness of the allegations. Anything to do with sex and scandals like that, immediately the first thing. And when it's with a teenager as well, I just can't understand what they were actually thinking of and why there has been such a long delay. It's just been incredibly damaging to them, and to just suspend them now and call in the police now. The other thing I want to know is why the police aren't speaking to the presenter in question. You see, it just causes more confusion and more dark clouds hang over as a result. But what fundamentally happens is the BBC's reputation as a position, its position of trust, is eroded with the British viewing public. And they should have learnt by now. They've had Jimmy Savile, they've had Rolf Harris, they had obviously the mess with poor Sir Cliff Richard, but they really now should have measures put into place for when these things do happen. It's a massive organisation, and you are going to get bad apples sometimes come through. That's to be said. But really, have they not learnt lessons from the past? I'm very disappointed in them, and I'm a great defender of the BBC.
Right.
I'm a passionate advocate for it, but I am disappointed in their handling.
All right, Sarah, I think a lot of us share your view. That's
Well said, Sarah.
TV journalist Sarah Robertson. There should be, in any big organisation, an emergency procedure that clicks into place. HR step in, suspend, investigate.
Safeguarding is such an important issue, and that's effectively what this is. It's a safeguarding concern.
Yeah.
You would think that they would have their protocol nailed on immediately. And
when you consider
maybe
what was just going on at ITV just a few weeks ago with Philip Schofield, would they not learn anything from that?
Yeah, it's really shocking, actually, that this speculation continues. I mean, they did give a statement, didn't they, over the weekend? The BBC first became aware of the complaint in May, new allegations on Thursday of a different nature, and we were saying maybe that was this call. Two calls that the presenter allegedly made to the accuser, the potential alleged victim, to say, what have you done, triggering this investigation? You need to stop. And that is
not exactly the call that person should have made.
No, that just shows somebody panicking.
And just to remind you, the police are today talking to the BBC about this extraordinary story involving a household name presenter. We can't share that name with you.
Unfortunately, I imagine the BBC will be making more statements as the day continues. Now, still to come, we're going to update you on our brilliant Do Not Kill Cash campaign. You have given over 190,000 signatures, which is just remarkable.
Keep signing, because we want to get over 200,000 next. It's 10:27. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Now, on to GB News' new campaign, Don't Kill Cash.
Well, 1 week in, and the GB News Don't Kill Cash campaign has now topped 191,000 signatures following its launch last Monday. It's to save the pound in your pocket.
And give you choice and freedom. If you want to get involved, grab your phone to scan and sign, or there it is. If you've got your phone, you put the camera on and you scan that. If you don't want to do that, we understand. You can sign the petition on a website, gbnews.com/cash.
And we are getting a PO box too for the people, old-fashioned people like me, who prefer to do it the old-fashioned way, because physical cash isn't the only thing we're talking about today.
So a digital version of the British pound may feature a way to verify a holder's age and citizenship status, allowing for the purchase of alcohol and tobacco without additional ID.
So we're going to speak now to journalist and digital currency expert Susie Violet-Ward. Morning.
Morning, Susie. Great to see you. So, I know that you've been, you're absolute expert on this topic of the digital pound, but a lot of us are still a little in the dark as to what this might mean, but it does tie in with our campaign. Just explain to us what a digital currency is and what are the government doing at the moment?
It's a central bank digital currency, CBDC, and it will be a digital version of the currency that we have at the moment. The difference is that it will be issued by the Bank of England and it will be programmable.
Now, there's been a consultation about this that was, I think, been running for maybe 6 months or so. How was the British public reaction to that?
It's difficult to say because they weren't really informed about it.
No, I wasn't.
But my understanding,
I mean, who did they consult?
They didn't consult anybody. In fact, 3 days after the consultation ended, I saw the Digital Pound Foundation talking about the digital pound and CBDCs, and that was 3 days after the consultation is closed.
And so, basically, behind the scenes at the moment, and we've seen Rishi Sunak, before he was Prime Minister, very excited, selling the concept of a central banking digital currency to the nation. This is absolutely, this would be a success story for him, wouldn't it, if he was able to push this through. But I think a lot of people will still be unclear as to what it is. They will say, well, I have a digital bank account. I can see the numbers online. How is it different, Susie?
This is programmable money. It's a complete reshape of our current financial system and the way that money works at the moment. So this will be able to, it will be linked to your spending. It will be a way of harvesting data. They will use all the right buzzwords and tell you that there's privacy. I saw on the Bloomberg article that Nuggets was a decentralized, a private protocol, and that they took all the buzzwords of Bitcoin and they basically throw it into a wallet and say, no, it has everything that you need. It's private. We can't get it. But what they'll do is they will encourage people to sell their data for discounts. So people already have, they're already giving their data over, but this way they will have absolute control over everything that you're spending.
I mean, it sounds like a sort of dystopian nonsense, doesn't it?
I can't bear the thought of it.
It sounds like
sinister.
But surely this must be decades away, Susie.
No, I think they're pushing it forward. I think it was at least 2030, and now I think they want to bring it forward to at least 2025.
And why would any government want to do that?
Well, it's a global agenda, so it's being pushed out globally. So the retail CBDC consultation was a nonsense, and the way that it was actually written was like it was inevitable. They were pushing ahead with it. They were just asking people how they wanted it to look. So I don't think this has anything to do with our government. It's being pushed down as a global agenda.
I imagine Biden and Sunak might talk about it this morning.
I'm sure they will be talking about it because, as you say, it's not a coincidence that it's happening in all countries around the world all at the same time. These same conversations are being had. Do you think there's a deliberate campaign to suppress discussion about this topic because it will affect every single one of us?
Yes, I do. And I think it's because they don't want people to understand. And when they're in a position where they are ready to roll it out, they will just tell people what they want to hear so that they can get them on board. There won't be an honest discussion about it because there hasn't been so far.
All right, that's Susie Violet-Ward. Thanks.
Thank
news
you.
to me. I knew nothing about it. So much for consultation.
It's so much for consultation. And there were about 50,000 people who did know about it, who did say that they didn't want it on the consultation. So there is a small but noisy minority who are trying to make their voices heard.
Biden's in the UK. He's here to see the Prime Minister. We'll be there when he arrives this morning. That's after our morning news with Aaron.
Hello, it's 10:32. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB Newsroom. The US President is on his way to meet the Prime Minister at Downing Street for discussions about Ukraine. The UK is one of several allies, though, to question Joe Biden's decision to supply Kyiv with controversial cluster munitions for its counter-offensive against Russia. The leaders also have differing views over Ukraine's bid to join NATO. Later today, President Biden will have tea with the King at Windsor Castle, where they're expected to discuss climate change. The BBC is due to meet the police later to discuss claims one of its male presenters paid a 17-year-old for sexually explicit images. The corporation yesterday announced it had suspended the unnamed star following allegations in The Sun he'd paid the teenager £35,000. And they suspended him almost 2 months after a complaint was first made by the alleged victim's family. The BBC says allegations of a different nature came to light last week. Shareholders in Thames Water have agreed to provide a further £750 million worth of funding in an attempt to stave off nationalisation. The utility giant, though, is warning it needs another £2.5 billion by 2030 as it struggles with significant debts. The latest funding deal comes amid government contingency plans to take over the firm if it collapses. Thousands of holidaymakers are facing disruption this summer after EasyJet cancelled around 1,700 flights. It's blaming air traffic control delays in Europe. Now, most of the cancelled flights were scheduled from Gatwick. The airline says 95% of those passengers affected have been booked onto alternative routes. Air traffic controllers in Europe have threatened to strike over the next 6 months, but they have not confirmed dates. And more on all of our stories on our website. We'll also have updates in our later bulletins throughout the morning and afternoon.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
So we're going live to Downing Street because Joe Biden is arriving in his entourage. Breaking news. So he's arriving any minute now, any second. I could even be there. Here he is. Now, see, they'll only show a bit of the entourage, the car entourage. So big swish cars arriving. The President of the United States, this is his 5th visit meeting with the Prime Minister in as many months. Relations are strained. He's on his way to a NATO summit in Vilnius, which the Prime Minister will go to. So he's calling in literally a flying visit. Then later he's going to see the King at Windsor Castle. No sign of Biden yet. He'll be getting out of the car. How many minders has he got there, Bev, do you think? If you're listening on the radio, there are a lot of armed hoods.
Yeah, there really
protection officers. I think that looks like the First Lady, dressed in white. We didn't know she was coming. I think that's the First Lady. It could, of course, be a dignitary. I can't quite work out why they've stopped so far from the door of number 10.
Especially given his proclivity for tripping up.
Yeah, exactly.
They might want to take him a little closer to the red carpet.
But the Prime Minister will come to the door to meet him, if in fact he's not already there. So, big moment. They are, of course, we are meant to have a very special relationship with the United States. But he doesn't appear to have got out the car yet. They're going to be talking about Ukraine. They're going to be talking about cluster bombs because the President of the United States wants to send cluster bombs to Ukraine, which are appalling in my view. 122 countries, including Britain, have signed treaties saying we should not use them because they can cause huge damage to civilians. I'm not sure if that is the First Lady, actually.
I don't think it is it? No.
She's too young.
But do you know what I think is interesting on days like this is obviously the media are all rather fascinated by this. I think the British public were much more excited when Donald Trump came to town. If you cast your mind back, if Donald Trump was in town, there was a general kind of excitement amongst the public because he was such a character.
Never a dull moment.
You weren't sure what was going to happen. I think if the British public feel a bit sort of flattened, frustrated, or even slightly angry at President Joe Biden.
Well, I mean, Piers Posty was saying that he's the most anti-British president of the United States for a very long time. He was seen with people like Gerry Adams, who was very closely associated with the IRA during the Troubles, and he didn't come to the coronation. Now, Darren McCaffrey was saying, well, there's no precedent for it because the President of the United States didn't go to the coronation in 1953. Well, that was 70 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, what's that about? I mean,
yeah.
The President of the United States can go to the coronation. I thought it was astonishing he wasn't there. He sent the First Lady instead.
If you're listening on the radio, we're just looking at pictures. We've got the black railings of Downing Street in the background. And there are, I think we can see 4, possibly maybe 3 or 4 of the big cars from the cavalcade.
Bulletproof too.
Bulletproof. So these cars will have been flown over.
They've been flown over on Air Force One.
Air Force
and they
One.
will be talking. The King will be talking to the President of the United States about the environment later. Will you ask him about how many cars in his entourage and flying on his own private jet?
There are a lot of, I think they're journalists and reporters running very quickly from the gates at Downing Street up towards the press pen, which would suggest that maybe there is going to be some movement any second now.
We're going to be joined now by Sarah Elliott, who's from Republicans Abroad. Sarah Elliott, morning to you. We don't have a great relationship with this president, do we?
Well, he seems to be very fond of the EU and not very fond of Brexit Britain. So it's been a bit contentious, I would say. And it doesn't help that he's, you know, kind of holds on to this old Irish mentality of the first half of the 20th century, which is completely irrelevant now in US politics.
We're just watching, Sarah, the door is open. It looks like the president is emerging onto the street. Yes, he is.
We don't know why the delay. He may have been on the telephone, of course, but he's now walking up the street into Downing Street. Rishi Sunak will, of course, greet him at the door. It looks like Rishi Sunak has now emerged. This is a big moment, Sarah, nevertheless. Despite the fact there isn't a great relationship, they are traditionally one of our most important allies, the United States.
I mean, absolutely. And it doesn't matter who's president or prime minister. Our nations are very unitedly tied together, especially on security. And I have to say, I think it's great that the president has come to the UK before going to Vilnius. I think it shows the world that we are united despite the rhetoric out there. And, you know, he is an 80-year-old man who's gaffe-prone and has said some silly things. And so I think it's good that they continue to get together and show a united front.
We think probably almost certainly, Sarah, there will be on the agenda this morning America's decision to supply, or to certainly think about supplying cluster bombs to Ukraine as part of the war against Russia. That's something that Rishi Sunak is opposed to. We're one of 122 nations opposed to it. Is that going to cause a lot of tension between the two today?
I think it might. I know they're going to try to keep it on a high note before meeting the other countries and Lithuania. But, you know, there is another gaffe that President Biden slipped in a CNN interview just yesterday. And he basically said that we're all running low on ammunition, that the U.S. is running low on 155 millimeter weapons. And so this is actually out of necessity to help Ukraine, that we need to supply them with these cluster bombs. And so it's not a very nice idea. I do think the president doesn't like the idea of using them. But if we are to continue to support Ukraine, I think this might be a necessary measure. But it is going to cause tensions. And the biggest tension of all is, of course, not backing Ben Wallace for Secretary General of NATO.
Yeah, that's
and backing von der Leyen, a German of all things.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just think it just goes to show where you know, the Democrats prefer, you know, to work with the EU on this stuff is kind of punishment, I think, in a way. But it's also maybe to keep, maybe to bully the UK a bit. You know.
And Sarah, when Ursula von der Leyen, she's currently the president of the European Commission, but when she was defence minister, you will know, in Germany, she presided over a parade of the army where they were supported by broomsticks because they didn't have enough rifles. I mean, and that is who Joe Biden is putting forward to be Secretary General of NATO. Shocking.
I mean, it is shocking. The other thing that has come out that hasn't gotten a lot of press is that Ben Wallace was, when he was part of the Scots Guard in Northern Ireland during the time of the Troubles. And we know just how loyal Joe Biden is to Jerry Adams, Rita O'Hare, you know, Sinn Féin. So that could have something. There could be a bias there against him for that role. But, you know, Biden is known to bully allies and people alike. His comments on Ukraine about how he demanded changes before they got aid. You know, he could be doing this as well with the United Kingdom. But I do think that it's a wonderful thing that they're meeting right now, that he is meeting with the king. I did think it was a bit weird. He didn't attend the coronation. And in fact, Jill Biden brought her granddaughter. Why not Anthony Blinken? And they dressed in, you know, Ukrainian flag colors. I thought that was a bit weird. But, you know, he was offended by where he was seated at the Queen's funeral.
Yeah.
I mean, that is
He was sat behind Commonwealth leaders, wasn't he?
It's all petty, if you ask me.
Yeah.
But, you know, maybe we'll get new leadership in 2024.
All right, that's Republicans overseas Sarah Elliott. He was deeply offended, and I remember seeing at that coronation thinking, oh, my God, he's behind the president of something like the Dominican Republic. It was hilarious.
We are part of the Commonwealth.
We are.
Well, we've got our panellists going to be here. We're going to come to them in just a moment. But first of all, let's go to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, at Downing Street. Darren, there was dozens of people walking in behind President Biden there, and I guess that's his standard entourage.
Indeed it is. There are a lot of officials here. The US President does not travel around lightly. The people that you saw running up the street actually were the press corps, the White House press corps, who follow the US President wherever they go. As you can see, there's these enormous trucks, as you rightly pointed out, along with the two beasts at the other end of the street, which are flown over specifically for the US President. And hundreds of people, or at least 100 people, went in immediately afterwards, including Anthony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, who was here as well. We believe, actually, the Prime Minister's meeting with the US President in the Downing Street Garden. Rather than inside. It's a rather pleasant day here in London. We're expecting that meeting to last around 45 minutes to an hour. They have met a hell of a lot in the last 6 months or so. 6 times since he became Prime Minister, 5 times in as many months. Clearly, Ukraine will be on the agenda, not least of all because both of them will be attending that NATO summit in Vilnius in Lithuania tomorrow. President Biden's travelling later on today. Prime Minister's travelling tomorrow morning. In fact, I'll be travelling with Rishi Sunak to that summit. What else will be on the agenda? Maybe green issues. We know that's what he's going to go and talk to the King about a bit later on this afternoon. And potentially just a kind of wider special relationship. I think one of the issues that won't potentially be on will be on this issue of trade. Just to kind of take on this narrative that you guys talk about, we may well disagree on it, whether he's anti-British or not. I mean, he has met Rishi Sunak a hell of a lot. The US has actually carved out special deals for the UK when it comes to trade as well. And frankly, you know, I would take on this narrative from your previous guest that kind of just because he's pro-Irish would automatically mean he's anti-British. It is maybe rather extraordinarily easy to be both pro-Irish and pro-British. I'm not sure. I think it's kind of a narrative that people kind of have clutched onto, if you like, that he's anti-British, when he's met Rishi Sunak probably more than any other world leader in the last 6 months or so.
OK, thank you, Darren.
We'll take your word for it, Darren. That's Darren McCaffrey, our political editor in Downing Street. He doesn't convince me.
No.
And I've got to say, we've got Emma Wolf with us and Bush Rochet. When you see President Biden walking up the Downing Street, he's doddery and he doesn't inspire confidence. This is the leader of the Western world, the free world. You just think, oh, God, is he going to fall over?
I don't think
is he going to trip?
I don't think for a second he's making any of these decisions himself. Do you, Bush Rochet?
I don't think so. I just think he's the face of America. I think he's fragile. And, you know, I don't want to be ageist, but we do really need to think about our leaders and age when it comes to that. I don't think he can lead anymore. I think he's just standing in.
You can get great people of 80 who could lead the world, but he's not one of them. It's not him, is it?
And I think the truth about the coronation was the fact that he'd just been over to Ireland and he couldn't cope with coming back.
That's right.
I mean, the fact that he has to fly out to Lithuania tonight, probably needs to lie down and a rest, whereas Rishi will be up at 4 and go tomorrow morning.
And he arrived in Britain last night.
Exactly,
so
and
he
needs
can have
that
his
rest again.
8 hours sleep or 9 hours sleep.
Lucky man.
I mean, Mrs Thatcher
but you
survived on 4.
When you're a world leader, when you're the US leader, you need to be getting up at 4 every morning, unfortunately, and doing things. And I just think, and I hate ageism as well, but I think in this case he is probably time to have a rest.
I'm not arguing in favour of Trump, but Trump is, what, 3 years younger, but he could be 15 years, 20 years younger, couldn't he? Still running a business successfully, still upsetting
He's got a bit of a pot belly and his golfing.
Yeah.
He looks pretty funny on the golf course, but
it's funny, isn't it? Because Robert Kennedy Jr., who wants to be a challenger for the nomination with Biden, is putting a lot of videos on social media, Bushra, I don't know whether you've seen, doing push-ups, doing chin-ups. He's in great physical shape. He's sharp as a tack.
Totally. And the thing is, I think young people as well need to be inspired by the leaders. And you know, when you have people like that are out there, that are also driven and passionate about leading countries, you do need that as a leader, as president. And I think Biden lacks that at the moment.
It's not just age, it's when he rambles. It's when he... Do you remember in Ireland when he started rambling on about the black and tans and he was getting... And no one really knew where he was going with that. He makes, obviously the gaffes that we all know about, but he doesn't seem mentally sharp. You know, I mean, forget the press-ups and the push-ups.
Or when he falls over, you know,
I know.
really concerned
and you think,
about
is he going to be able to get up again? And the worry is, he's going to probably be the Democrat who's going to run for the presidency again. And
Which
he
would be. I mean, he would be then how old by the end of the next...
Well, he'd be 84, 85, 86.
But surely he would have, like, his advisors saying perhaps this is the last run, you know?
They never know when to go, do they?
No, they don't.
And the worry is that the vice president then becomes the president in all but name.
I don't think he has.
She's useless.
But I think he's already president in all but name. I don't think he's making any of the decisions behind the scenes, is he? It's the big banks, it's the big corporations, it's the World Economic Forum, it's the people, it's the Davos crowd who are making the decisions, not him.
But to see Rishi sort of kowtowing and being all anxious around him and being the sort of junior, that's why it's a bit depressing, because he doesn't need to.
No.
He can stand proud for Britain and talk to, you know, he doesn't need to rush to the door when Biden rings on the bell.
You can't see Mrs Thatcher behaving quite like that, can you, really? I mean, they were in awe of her.
Yes, well, quite.
Long time since we've had a Prime Minister like that, really.
With some
we've got to talk to you about the great BBC scandal. My word. What do you make of it?
Doing a lot of damage. And you know what? For a different take, because we're not going to say the name and la. I just got a text from a friend who's in her 70s and she lives in the Isle of Sheppey. She said, you know what? I've just had my reminder through for my BBC licence fee. She said, £159. They want £159 off me. I'm not paying for those grubby pedos. That's what she said.
And there'll be more and more people
who think that the damage it's doing, I mean, that's just one person's comment, a friend of mine.
We've just come to interrupt, and we've got some breaking news. We don't know what it is, but breaking news coming up. Our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, is with us. So we're back in Downing Street, and we can see one of the boroughs. Mark White's with us, our Home and Security Editor. Mark, what can you see? Oh, he's in.
Oh, he's here in the studio.
So we've had some images in Downing Street, but we're not quite sure what they're supposed to be showing.
It's a breaking news day,
some breaking
ladies
news
and gentlemen.
in Downing Street. Our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Are there protesters in Downing Street?
No, this is an incident that's unfolding at a school in Gloucestershire, in Tewkesbury, the market town of Tewkesbury. That school, we're told, is on lockdown at the moment. Gloucestershire police have just put out a statement confirming that. We are not in a position to say anything else at this stage. We don't know an awful lot more, except that this primary school is in lockdown. It's on Ash... let me just find that for you. Ashchurch Road in Tewkesbury. That's anybody knows Tewkesbury is a lovely little
lovely
market
market town.
20,000 people.
Yeah, it's lovely.
The school, according to Gloucestershire Police, putting out a statement, is in lockdown at the moment. Now, the school itself has also tweeted urging parents not to come to the school, and they've said that all the children are safe.
Good.
So that is some good news that's coming through from the school, but there is a report of at least one injury, we believe. But as I say, we don't know any more in terms of how that injury was sustained. We're in the very early stages of this incident. The area has been locked down at the moment.
And this comes only, of course, what happened at Wimbledon School only last week. 2 little girls died as a result of that car crashing into the school. Do we have any detail about what's happened at Tewkesbury?
Well, I think we're safe to say it looks like a very different incident to the one in Wimbledon, which was a vehicle incident involving a car crashing into the school. We don't think it's that type of an incident, but at least one person, we believe, has been injured as a result of this.
Well, it's very much a breaking news situation that we will try and bring you more details as we know them.
Yeah. And of course, currently we've got the Prime Minister in the number 10 with the President of the United States. They're in the garden. How lovely. It's a very nice garden, by the way. I've been in it many times.
Have you?
It's a very nice garden.
Thought you might say that.
Very big garden. And, of course, that's famously where Boris Johnson was partying on the swing. We've still got Emma Wolf with us. We were talking about Biden and the relationship. Emma, you're no fan of Biden.
I'm not.
Would you prefer Trump?
To see?
Look,
if there's a choice, I mean, what a choice.
What angers me, I just think we should respect the choice of people to elect people like Donald Trump. I don't understand why we sneer at Americans who elected him. In vast millions of people elected him, and it just makes me sick, the sneering of, you know, millions of Americans who decided Donald Trump was the man, that he was talking sense to them.
He talked their language.
He talked their language, but he was talking about things they care about, things like, you know, immigration and making America great again. That resonated with a lot of people. And of course, it was around the same time that everybody was sneering at Brexiteers as racist bigots, and I'm just sick of it. And so it does make me think, you know what? They can choose Donald Trump again if they wish to.
But if you had a choice between Trump or Ron DeSantis.
I think
Ron DeSantis every time.
I think DeSantis is blown away.
Do you?
It appears it's all gone. Where's he gone? He's vanished.
Yeah, exactly.
He was the front runner.
I don't think he's got much chance either.
He appears to have just sank without trace. What's gone wrong there?
I don't know. I think, I mean, there was a couple of... I mean, listen, the forces against him, which will be at work to stop him, will be immense. You know, I mean, Biden has a lot of control over the American media outlets. He certainly has very close relationships with them. I'm not sure any of them are going to get a fair hearing in the run-up to the election, but...
Yeah. Now, in the next few moments, we're going to continue to discuss the reputation of the BBC after yet another damaging sex scandal which has engulfed the corporation.
And I'm going to be getting some of your views as well. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. I'm sorry we haven't got there so far. It's been a bit of a busy show, but we will do all of that in the next hour. We're GB News, Britain's news channel.
The temperature's rising.
Talking about the school.
Blimey.
Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. We saw lots of showers over the weekend. There will be more to come today. In fact, some longer spells of rain too, and feeling quite fresh. And that's the picture for the next few days as well. Low pressure in charge of our weather, bringing showers and longer spells of rain. It doesn't go anywhere quickly for much of this week, really, keeping it fairly unsettled and cool. And yes, there is some sunshine first thing this morning, particularly across the north and the east, but towards the southwest we've got gathering clouds and outbreaks of rain. This is slowly going to push north and eastwards as we go through the day. Some of this rain could be heavy at times for parts of Wales into the Midlands, northwestern parts of England later as well. Elsewhere will generally be a case of sunshine and showers, and some of them will be heavy at times, possibly thundery too. Best of the sunshine towards the southeast, where we'll see highs approaching the mid-20s, feeling quite chilly under the cloud and rain. Into this evening, that rain pushes northwards and fragments into showers, but then towards the southwest we see further rain pushing into southern counties of England and Wales as we move overnight. Some of this will be heavy as well, and you can see further showers across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England too. So this will keep temperatures up, generally between 14 and 17 Celsius to take us into Tuesday morning. So it's a bit of an unsettled start. We have rain clearing eastwards across England and Wales, showers elsewhere, some of these heavy at times for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and then later on Northern England too. Some rumbles of thunder possible. A few glimmers of sunshine in between the showers, and feeling quite fresh, particularly around the west where it will be quite breezy. Temperatures in the high teens to low 20s across the UK, which is a little below average, particularly where we do have that strength of wind. Over the next few days it does stay unsettled, further showers, longer spells of rain, and temperatures generally on the cool side, reaching the low 20s at best towards the south and east.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
And we're going to bring you the latest on the lockdown at a secondary school in Tewkesbury in Gloucestershire. And also we're crossing to the BBC HQ to get the latest on the scandal involving a household name presenter.
That's right. You are with GB News, Britain's news channel.
Damn, it makes me look... It's 11 a.m. on Monday, the 10th of July. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. A BBC presenter accused of paying a teenager for explicit pictures has been suspended, and the Met Police are now looking into the claims. What does this mean for the future of the BBC? Have you lost trust in our public service broadcaster?
And Rishi Sunak has described as rock solid his relationship between the United States and the UK. He's hosting Joe Biden right now in the Downing Street Garden. We're going to bring you more from their conversation shortly.
And in the last hour, a school in Tewkesbury has gone into lockdown after an incident. We will bring you the very latest. Let us know your thoughts this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email. But first, here's Aaron with the news.
Very good morning to you. It's a minute past 11. Aaron Armstrong here in the GB Newsroom. And we start with some breaking news. Police and emergency crews are responding to an incident at Tewkesbury Primary School in Gloucestershire. Now, the school is currently in lockdown while police assess the situation. That is all the information we have at the moment, but we will, of course, bring you more on this developing story as soon as we get it. Well, as you've just been hearing, the US president's arrived at Downing Street for talks with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. This is their 6th meeting in 7 months, but the first time Joe Biden's visited number 10. Now, the official purpose of the meeting is to further strengthen the close relationship between the nations, a relationship that Joe Biden says is rock solid. However, it does come amid tension over the US decision to send cluster bombs to Ukraine and also over Ukraine's ambitions to join NATO. Both will attend tomorrow's Leader Summit in Lithuania, where no doubt those issues will be discussed. Later today, President Biden will have tea with the King at Windsor Castle to discuss climate change. The BBC is due to meet the police later to discuss claims one of its male presenters paid a 17-year-old for sexually explicit images. The corporation announced yesterday it had suspended the unnamed star following the allegations in The Sun that he'd paid £35,000 for the photos. The announcement came almost 2 months after a complaint was first made by the alleged victim's family. The BBC says allegations of a different nature came to light last week. The Justice Secretary, Alex Chalk, told GB News the broadcaster must hold an urgent investigation.
These are really serious and really concerning allegations, and they need to be investigated quickly. Now, in the fullness of time, maybe there will be a consideration as to how this was dealt with. I think the important thing now, however, is that these matters are investigated, whether that's within the BBC, but also potentially by the police, if indeed that's what the police decide to do.
Shareholders in Thames Water have agreed to provide a further £750 million worth of funding in an attempt to stave off nationalisation. The utility giant, though, has warned it needs another £2.5 billion by 2030 as it struggles under a mountain of debt. The latest funding deal comes amid government's contingency plans to take control of the firm if it collapses. Well, Thames Water is the UK's biggest supplier, serving 15 million households across the southeast. Thousands of holidaymakers are facing travel disruption this summer after EasyJet announced it was cancelling around 1,700 flights, blaming air traffic control delays in Europe. Now, most of the cancelled flights are from Gatwick Airport. The airline says 95% of affected passengers have been booked onto alternative flights. Air traffic controllers in Europe have threatened to walk out over the next 6 months, but dates have yet to be confirmed. Labour is promising to create up to 4 million jobs and reduce household bills in plans it says will benefit tradespeople across the country. Labour claims its National Warm Homes Plan to provide better insulation for 19 million households will reduce energy bills by up to £500 a year. The aim is to create long-term, highly paid jobs for skilled workers. The Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray, told GB News the retrofitting plans will save people money.
Really important thing about doing this insulation program, this retrofit program, is that firstly it saves people money. It brings down the average household bill by £500, by up to £500 permanently. That's an investment to make sure those bills come down. but it also creates jobs. It creates job opportunities for up to 4 million people across the country, people with skills such as roofers, glaziers, plumbers, mechanics and so on. And so it helps with the economic growth that we've been so sorely lacking for the last 13 years.
The government says significant progress has been made in providing better support for rape victims. Campaigners, though, claim it's too early to tell. The Home Office and the Ministry of Justice say a progress report published today shows the number of police referrals and cases reaching court have been restored to 2016 levels ahead of schedule. The report comes as police across England and Wales implement a new approach to dealing with rape and other serious sexual offences. Stephen Lawrence's mother says she's profoundly concerned about the slow pace of police reform. In a letter to the Home Secretary, Baroness Lawrence says she supports measures including the automatic dismissal of officers charged or convicted of serious crimes and officers who fail vetting. The Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, has said he believes there are hundreds of corrupt officers in the force who shouldn't be serving. The head of Russia's army has been seen for the first time since the Wagner Group's short-lived rebellion 2 weeks ago. Valery Gerasimov appeared in footage released by Russia's Defence Ministry. It was on state TV. He was seen meeting top generals and heads of military intelligence. Now, the leader of the Wagner Group, Evgeny Prigozhin, has fiercely criticised Gerasimov, calling for Vladimir Putin to hand him over ahead of last month's failed mutiny. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens, but now it is back to Andrew and Bev.
The breaking news is police and emergency crews are responding to an incident at a school in Tewkesbury in Gloucestershire. Our Home and Security Editor Mark White's in the studios with more details. Mark, what's happening?
This is Tewkesbury School, or Tewkesbury Academy as it's also known, on Ashchurch Road in Tewkesbury, an incident that is currently involving all three of the emergency services on scene there, and that school, that secondary school, is now on lockdown. There is a report of an injury, but we don't know any more than that at this stage. But this school and a neighbouring primary school have also been put on lockdown. And in fact, that neighbouring primary school's Turlbrook Primary School, and they posted on Facebook just in the last hour saying, "Dear families, an incident has occurred this morning at Tewkesbury Academy, Tewkesbury School, and we've been advised by Tewkesbury Police to put in place a lockdown. We have a police presence at the school and are being fully supported at this time." They go on to say, "We would like to reassure all families that children at Turlbrook and Little Oaks are safe and well. We must ask the families," they say, "to not come to the school during this time as it could compromise that policing operation which is currently underway." They say that during this situation, all school staff will be supporting the children and liaising with the police. So we'd ask that you do not attempt to communicate with the school office. So that's from this neighbouring primary school.
Right.
Nothing as yet from Tewkesbury School, Tewkesbury Academy, still at the centre of a lockdown, which we believe is still in place.
We kind of you see lockdowns in schools commonly in America. We don't have them here often at all, thank goodness. What kind of situations might give rise to a school locking down, Mark?
Well, certainly in the States it's commonplace, and it's usually related to school shootings. Sadly, all too common, as we say, in the US. Here, more recently, any time a school is facing such a situation, it can often be as a result of perhaps a stabbing incident or a threat made against the school, perhaps in rare occasions a shooting. But we're not in a position to say exactly. There are unconfirmed reports that are out there. We just like to sort of bottom it out a bit further before we bring you that information. But a serious incident that is unfolding with the police asking both the academy and the nearby primary school to lock down while they deal with this incident.
I know Tewkesbury quite well because I used to work in Gloucestershire. It's a lovely, tiny market town.
It is, yeah, 20,000 people. And as you say, it's a beautiful little town, very popular with tourists as well. So, of course, any incident that involves a lockdown will be shocking. It will be very concerning for family members who have people, children attending these schools. We can't say much more than really what's come out from the primary school. Nothing as yet from the academy, from this high school at the centre of this lockdown.
But Mark, you'll be with us as soon as they need.
As soon as we get more, I'll be straight back.
That's Mark.
And it sounds like the good news that the schools are saying the children are safe.
Well, we don't know that for a fact. We know that the primary schoolers are saying that they're keeping the children there safe, but we haven't heard anything from the academy as yet.
OK, thank you, Mark.
White at Home Security. Now, the BBC, my word, what extraordinary that is, suspended one of its male TV presenters. It is not a cliché to say a household name presenter who's been accused of paying a teenager £35 for sexually...
£35,000.
£35,000, forgive me.
It's still...
It's a lot of money.
It's mind-blowing, isn't it?
For sexually explicit images over a period of 3 years. The BBC is now facing questions over the whole way it's handled the issue. Doesn't look very well handled, frankly.
No, not at all. Well, police officers are going to meet with representatives from the BBC today about the incident, but the police have said they've not yet received a formal allegation.
So pressure will be on the Beeb to name the presenter because BBC Radio 5 Live host Nicky Campbell admits he's had a distressing weekend after he was accused on social media of being the unnamed presenter. Other presenters have taken to social media to say, it's not me, Gov.
But it was a distressing weekend. I can't deny it, for me and others falsely named. Today, I'm having further conversations with the police in terms of malicious communication and with lawyers in terms of defamation.
I think other people who were named on social media are also talking to lawyers because social media is a vicious place quite often, and it's filled with people who don't know what they're talking about, and all sorts of allegations have been flying around about who this person is. That's the difficulty the BBC's under, because they want to protect the privacy of the person who's been accused, but other people are getting dragged into this.
And it's about trust, this story, isn't it, first and foremost? And a lot of people feel in the last 3 years they've lost trust in the BBC. Let's talk to former BBC correspondent Michael Cole. Good morning, Michael. Good to see you again. This is about trust, isn't it? A lot of people always held a very special place in our hearts for the BBC. I used to. I don't anymore after the last 3 years, frankly. But for a lot of people, this will be a step too far, actually, and they will feel, well, we don't know, we can't trust the BBC. Who can we trust?
Beverly, many people will feel exactly as you do. The BBC has served us well for 100 years. I was proud to be part of it for more than a fifth of its existence. But as you say, the repeated scandals have undermined the trust. And what's worse, that people are not looking at it anymore, and yet they're being charged for the service. If you see young people, I would guess that most of them don't look at the BBC or listen to most of the programmes from week to week. And that's a problem when you have an effective poll tax, a licence fee. The BBC's charter, which essentially is its licence to keep broadcasting, will be up for review, has to be renewed by 2027. And the licence fee has been frozen for a couple of years. It's bound to go up again. More and more people, these are not radical people, say, well, what am I doing? What am I paying for? And when they see scandals like this emerging and the way they handle it, obviously it's going to undermine such as the confidence that we had. The best thing, and the only good thing the BBC has done so far, is to call the Metropolitan Police, because that's the first thing they should have done. Because what we're talking about here, if proven, are serious felonies that carry prison sentences of between 10 and 14 years. So that should have been their first reaction. An internal inquiry is not going to satisfy anybody. It's quite right, people like Nicky Campbell and the other people have taken the decision, wisely or unwisely, to come forward and say it's not me. There shouldn't be a cloud hanging over their head. But talking about clouds, this whole thing is like a sort of small distant cloud on the horizon that has turned into a thunderstorm, it's turned into a tornado, and we don't know who it's going to blow away. when it blows itself out.
Isn't it extraordinary, Michael, that the Director General, the person in charge of everything that the BBC does, whether it's on TV, radio or online, was only told about this, apparently, on Thursday? And yet the complaint was made originally to the BBC in the middle of May by the individual's mother.
Yeah, the BBC, in its defence, says that the information they had on Thursday was substantially different from the initial contact. But do you know something? Tim Davie was never a journalist. He's not a journalist. He's a marketing man. Because the Director General is not only the Director General, he's also the Editor-in-Chief. And I thought at the time it was a major error not to have an editorial person in charge, because the Editor-in-Chief has his fingers, as you know better than anybody, you've worked under some great Editors-in-Chief, has his fingers on everything, knows everything. And I think it's an unwieldy organisation, it's bureaucratic, it's slow on its feet, and it's been caught here badly out.
I think you're right. That's Michael Cole.
Thank you, Michael.
Former BBC correspondent. They have been flat-footed.
And the thing about Tim Davie, of course, he does come from... He has a corporate background. He worked for Coca-Cola among lots of other businesses. He also ran as a Tory MP at one point, if I remember. A Tory councillor.
Yeah.
He's got 3 grown-up teenage sons of his own. So you think he would take these, even from a personal point of view, he would take these sorts of allegations very seriously. I'm sure he is. But I think that you've got this sort of behemoth, which is the BBC.
Mike was saying it's so large.
It's so unwieldy.
22,000 people, something like that? Over 20,000?
The hoops and the protocols and the legal departments that something like this will have to go through must be a absolute nightmare to deal with, but it's no excuse for not handling this better.
And he probably, I'm just surmising here, the Director General is probably saying, for God's sake, why did nobody tell me before?
Very possibly, very possibly. So then it will come down to who is running the departments that this person might work for. You know, there's got to be a big investigation. But as Michael said, I don't think an internal investigation is necessarily going to be...
And also, why was that person still allowed to carry on broadcasting? Now, still to come. The United States are going to give cluster bombs to Ukraine to backfill the ammunition shortage. You know, there was an ammunition shortage. How dangerous are they? In fact, Biden is just leaving them. Well, that was quick. 5 minutes, was it?
Quick coffee and a biscuit, he's out.
Yeah, and is he going to talk to the media? I would lay money on it. He's not. No, he's getting into his... He's waving, he's pointing, he's getting into his car. He's not going to answer questions because he rarely answers questions to the media because he needs prepared questions. How long is it going to take him to get in that car?
That was rather interesting, actually. I don't know whether you saw, but as he was leaving the building, Rishi Sunak turned around, turned his back to him and walked back in through the front door. I mean, normally, if your guests are leaving, I don't know about you, but I stand on the front step and I wave them off.
I do.
We can't actually see right now 10 Downing Street, but Rishi Sunak certainly shook Biden's hand and turned to go back in the building.
I would say he was there for, what, 10:35 did he get there? So 25, 30...
Maybe less than half an hour.
Yeah. We'll get more on that. You're listening to GB News, Britain's news channel. back to the breaking news of an incident at a school in Tewkesbury in Gloucestershire, which is in lockdown by the police. Our Home Security Editor Mark White's in the studio. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, we can confirm that an adult has been taken to hospital with a suspected stab injury. This has now come from Gloucestershire Police, who've just given us an update. They say that they were called to Tewkesbury School, a secondary school in this town of 20,000 people, at just after 9 o'clock, 10 past 9 this morning, with a report that a pupil had stabbed a teacher.
Good Lord.
They say that a teenage boy has been arrested in connection with this incident. So, you know, we weren't sure exactly what this incident was about 20 minutes, half an hour ago or so. We didn't want to bring needless speculation, but the police confirming those reports that were beginning to circulate out there, that it appears the incident they were called to was reports that a pupil had stabbed a teacher, and they are confirming that an adult has suffered what appears to be stab injuries. No indication at all on the condition of that adult who has been taken to hospital at this time. A teenage boy, though, they confirm, is in custody.
You just think not Britain, but I was thinking just a few years ago, remember Anne Maguire, who was a Spanish teacher, stabbed to death by a pupil in school? Yeah. She was teaching a Spanish lesson. It was at a Leeds Catholic college.
Yeah, I mean, it does happen from time to time. Thankfully rare in terms of teachers actually being physically harmed to that extent. Teachers are assaulted all the time. If you ask the teaching unions, they will tell you this. But what is not as rare and what is quite frequent, sadly, these days are knife-related incidents and stabbings in or around schools. It's just a reflection of what we're seeing in the country as a whole, which is a big issue with knife crime, especially in urban areas.
You almost wonder if they're going to have to have detectors. Would it be a terrible indictment on our educators to have detectors?
Some schools do already.
Some do, don't they?
Well, indeed. But then what happens is fights break out outside school. I mean, most of these stabbing incidents do happen just either outside the ground or on the way home, that kind of thing. So, you know, is a metal detector really going to be that much of a deterrent anyway? What they do often these days now, and we see it when the police are out doing their stop and search patrols, is they actually hide their knives in places, in bushes and, you know, behind walls, wherever they stash their knife. And then they go and get it when they've got some argument with someone, and they end it with, you know, with a knife blade, which is just absolutely appalling.
It's terrible wherever it happens, but it seems all the more shocking it's happened in a little sleepy town like Tewkesbury in Gloucestershire.
Yeah, and at this hour, we believe that the emergency services, of course, are still all on the scene as we're now entering into what will probably be a prolonged investigation period. The school itself, we think, is still on lockdown. There will, obviously, it may be that the school is actually sent home for the day. You would expect something like that to happen if one of their teachers, if, you know, the initial reports that the police got are borne out to be true and a teacher has been stabbed here and perhaps a pupil arrested. I think it's unlikely that the school would maintain operations today. So we await word actually from Tewkesbury School itself as to what the situation is there. We know that Tewkesbury School, another secondary school next to Tewkesbury School, was in lockdown along with a primary school next to it, Turlbrook Primary School, where they sent out a message on Facebook saying, look, the staff are looking after children at the moment, urging parents not to come down while the police deal with the incident.
It actually sounds like the right measures were taken very quickly, doesn't it, with those three schools? My children have lockdown rehearsals at schools, you know.
How times have changed.
How times have changed. And when they came home and told me they'd been rehearsing lockdowns, I was really shocked and just thought, is this unnecessarily frightening children? But
well,
then, they did actually find it quite funny. Like, they were joking about how they were all hiding under the desk. I mean, luckily, you know what kids are like.
Yeah, well.
But it sounds, on a day like this, you think, actually, it's a good job they are doing these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is born from what they see in the States. Yeah. And then you have health and safety planners who feel that, look, you know, these things are very, very rare, but we think back to the Dunblane massacre. They do happen from time to time. So clearly they've decided, like, let's, in some schools at least, make it part of the learning process for those pupils in school and their staff as well. Should the unthinkable happen and they know what to do. On this occasion, they've gone into lockdown. Not that it appears at this stage that there was a wider threat to the school, but we do know one person is in custody, and we await a word really from the authorities as to whether the schools now are post-lockdown, whether that lockdown period has been lifted.
OK, thank you, Mark.
That's Mark White, Home Security Editor.
So, just a little while ago, we saw President Joe Biden leaving Downing Street following his rather brief meeting with the Prime Minister.
We're going to talk to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, in Downing Street. Blimey, Darren, blink and you'd have missed it.
Yeah, indeed, it was pretty brief, wasn't it? About 40 minutes, I reckon, all in. Took place in the Downing Street Gardens. Rather a nice day here in London. We haven't had yet a readout of what they discussed, but inevitably Ukraine would have been on the agenda. Not least of all because the only reason Joe Biden is here, if you like, is he's on his way to Lithuania, to a stop-off point. He's only in the UK for less than 24 hours. He's going to that NATO summit later on today. Rishi Sunak's due to fly tomorrow morning. He's left Downing Street now. He's on his way, though, to Windsor Castle, where he's going to meet with the King this afternoon. There's going to be a big ceremony in the quadrangle of Windsor Castle. And he's also going to meet, it must be said, with Grant Shapps alongside Anthony Blinken. They're going to focus on climate and the UK-US kind of relationship, if you like, when it comes to trying to tackle climate change. But as I say, Ukraine here, clearly Rishi Sunak and Joe Biden, I think, get on personally quite well, but there are cracks in the special relationship, if you like, when it comes to Ukraine, not least of all on its membership of NATO, whether that's going to happen anytime soon. Something the UK has pushed for, something the US said Ukraine is not ready for yet, not least of all because it is actively involved in a war. And also on this issue of using cluster bombs, which the US sanctioned over the weekend, something the UK is not signed up to. And we frankly heard from Rishi Sunak at the weekend, well, not condemning what the US were doing, making it clear that the UK was not in favour of that. And then there's also a row about who's going to take over as NATO Secretary General. The UK pushing for Ben Wallace, the current UK Defence Secretary. It seems that Joe Biden's going to pip instead for Ursula von der Leyen, the EU Commission President. So there are definitely tensions in this relationship, be in no doubt. But on the big picture, we'll see this in Vilnius tomorrow and on Wednesday. On the big picture, when it comes to commitment to Ukraine, both men very much would want to say, and frankly are, very much on the same page.
OK, thank you, Darren. Thank you very much. Very briefly, you've all been getting in touch at home this morning. We've got this story, obviously, about this disgraced BBC presenter. We still don't know the name of this person who was accepting images or paying for images from a teen. Richard has said, I stopped watching the BBC some 6 or 7 years ago because of their left-wing bias and, more importantly, their condescending presentation. They are so out of touch with the public, and stop paying them.
To be watching us.
And they will disappear, they say. So, yeah, lots of your messages.
Dennis says, scrap the corporation and the licence fee. Well, that would save £159 a year and a lot more.
But Virginia has said this is about truth, not trust. They have to make sure the accusations are true before they do anything. Right, we're going to be looking at that story as well a little bit more this morning. But first of all, here is your news with Aaron.
It's 11:31. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB Newsroom. Let's get you up to date with more details on the breaking news we brought you at the top of the hour. A teenage boy has been arrested following reports of a stabbing at a school in Gloucestershire. Police were called to Tewkesbury School just after 9 o'clock this morning, following that report that a student had stabbed a teacher. Now, an adult has been taken to hospital. Developing story, as I mentioned, so we will bring you more details as soon as we get them here on GB News. Meanwhile, the US president says the relationship between the US and UK is rock solid as he meets the Prime Minister at Downing Street. It's their 6th meeting in 7 months, the first time Joe Biden has visited number 10. Now, the official purpose of the meeting is to, in their words, further strengthen the close relationship between our nations. However, it does come amid tension over the US decision to send cluster bombs to Ukraine and over Ukraine's ambitions to join NATO, which the two leaders view differently. Both will attend tomorrow's Leaders' Summit in Lithuania. That's the NATO Leaders' Summit. And later today, President Biden will have tea with the King at Windsor Castle to discuss the environment. The BBC will meet the police later to discuss claims one of its male presenters paid a 17-year-old for sexually explicit images. The corporation announced yesterday it had suspended the unnamed star following the allegations in The Sun. But that announcement came almost 2 months after the complaint was first made by the alleged victim's family. The BBC says allegations of a different nature came to light last week, and it's taking them very seriously. Shareholders in Thames Water have agreed to provide a further £750 million in funding in an attempt to stave off nationalisation. The utility giant, though, has warned £2.5 billion more will be needed by 2030 as it struggles under a mountain of debt. The latest funding deal comes amid government contingency plans to take control if the firm collapses. More on all of our stories on our website. We'll be back throughout the morning and afternoon, but now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
But Andrew and Bev can wait just a moment while we give you a snapshot of the markets today. The pound will buy you $1.2802, €1.1677. The price of gold, £1,502.75 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 7,264 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Here is your morning's weather.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. We saw lots of showers over the weekend. There will be more to come today. In fact, some longer spells of rain too, and feeling quite fresh. And that's the picture for the next few days as well. Low pressure in charge of our weather, bringing showers and longer spells of rain. It doesn't go anywhere quickly for much of this week, really, keeping it fairly unsettled and cool. And yes, there is some sunshine first thing this morning, particularly across the north and the east, but towards the southwest we've got gathering clouds and outbreaks of rain. This is slowly going to push north and eastwards as we go through the day. Some of this rain could be heavy at times for parts of Wales into the Midlands, northwestern parts of England later as well. Elsewhere will generally be a case of sunshine and showers, and some of them will be heavy at times, possibly thundery too. Best of the sunshine towards the southeast, where we'll see highs approaching the mid-20s, feeling quite chilly under the cloud and rain. Into this evening, that rain pushes northwards and fragments into showers, but then towards the southwest we see further rain pushing into southern counties of England and Wales as we move overnight. Some of this will be heavy as well, and you can see further showers across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England too. So this will keep temperatures up, generally between 14 and 17 Celsius to take us into Tuesday morning. So it's a bit of an unsettled start. We have rain clearing eastwards across England and Wales, showers elsewhere, some of these heavy at times for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and then later on Northern England too. Some rumbles of thunder possible. A few glimmers of sunshine in between the showers, and feeling quite fresh, particularly around the west where it will be quite breezy. Temperatures in the high teens to low 20s across the UK, which is a little below average, particularly where we do have that strength of wind. Over the next few days it does stay unsettled, further showers, longer spells of rain, and temperatures generally on the cool side, reaching the low 20s at best towards the south and east.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Still to come this morning, we're going to have more on the BBC scandal.
And the United States giving cluster bombs to Ukraine. I don't feel very good about it. What do you feel about it? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. It's 11:40. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Now, thank you for joining us this morning. We've been covering President Biden's meeting with Rishi Sunak. Now we're going to look into how the United States are giving cluster bombs to Ukraine, which is apparently to backfill a munitions shortage. But how dangerous are they? Joining us now is the defence editor for the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. Good morning, Robert. Just explain to us what these cluster bombs are and why they are so controversial.
They're controversial because they've been outlawed by nearly 120 countries, including the UK. They're very unpleasant because they're little mines that are dropped from either bombs from aircraft, but in this case, artillery shells break up into 250 of these things, and they scatter across a wide area, and they designed to stop infantry. But what happens is that they hang around battlefields, or they hang around towns I've seen where they've been shelled by these things. And they hang in trees, and in the Balkans they're called little bells. And to children they look rather attractive as toys. And the consequences, you can imagine, that happen from that. And that's why They're not liked. They've come under the Anti-Mine Convention. Mr. Sunak has made his views very clear about this. But America is doing this for, I think, motives which are very typical of Biden and the Biden administration. It's the least bad option for the opportunism of the moment. The United States is running out of conventional shells to provide to Ukraine. It cannot ramp up production. They've got loads of these things in reserve, so they're giving them to Ukraine.
But Robert, the President of the United States needs to keep that international coalition behind him to support Ukraine. He's not going to do that if he starts handing over these lethal weapons, which, as you point out, could hang around for a very long time. A minefield, literally, for civilians and children.
Yes, I'm not quite sure how much that alienates the alliance, but I think you're right to finger the fact that there are, I'm afraid to say, real tensions under the surface in NATO between America and particularly the East Europeans, because and also there's a very, very difficult balancing act for Sunak and his team, which, as you've been reporting, as we've been discussing, have been on the front foot. They've said, yes, get on, provide long-range weapons like the Storm Shadow, which they want the American equivalent, ATACMS. That's what's really needed to get behind the front lines of the Russians into those deep defences, by the way, which are full of minefields. No, Britain has been on the forefront of putting main battle tanks. They were the first, so others followed. Britain has also suggested that they need up-to-date conventional fighter aircraft like the F-16. Which the Europeans are prepared to supply. But because the deep support of the F-16 depends on the Americans are saying, for the time being, no. Let's wait till the offensive is over, the current offensive that's going on in the summer. Well, if it's over with dramatic defeat for the Ukrainians, it's a pretty bad look for America. And I think that one of the things that will be running the undercurrents to the Vilnius meeting is America about to dial down on its commitment to Ukraine. And all the other discussions about whether Hungary joins, about whether they build up more frontline forces in case Russia ramps up its aggressive stance and does something unexpected and very, very dangerous. Those go to the side. It is really what the American commitment and leadership will be from this autumn to next autumn, because it's pretty uncertain the way the Biden administration is going to behave during the presidential election campaign.
OK, brilliant as usual. Defence editor for the Evening Standard, Robert Fox there.
Those weapons are more horrific than I ever realised.
But also what's extraordinary is we're talking about leaving them on Ukrainian soil. Yeah. Which would, in the future, perhaps affect Ukrainian people.
Yeah, for years and years to come.
Makes no sense. Right, our panellists are back here with us. Emma Wolf and Bushra Sheikh. What would you like to talk about, ladies?
What about Miss Netherlands?
Shall we? The thing is, we don't want to talk about trans issues all the time, and there are 3 massive trans stories in the paper today. Bushra, tell us about the Miss Netherlands competition.
Miss Netherlands beauty pageant won by a transgender. And
so a bloke?
So it's not really Miss. It's not Miss, is it anymore? No. It's Mr. Netherlands. Mr. Netherlands.
Do we know a fully transitioned male to female? Do we know details?
We don't know, but obviously just looking at him.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm so confused. I don't even know how to call them. But if you look at who came second.
Yeah.
Absolutely stunning, beautiful woman who's come second. And these are pageants for women.
Yeah.
What are we doing? What's going on?
It's the first time in the history of the pageant, and now Miss Netherlands, will be in the Miss Universe.
Virtue signalling being pushed to the most ludicrous degree. First it was sport, wasn't it? The swimmers, male swimmers could transition and become winning all the contests. As Bushra says, if a beauty pageant for women can't be won by a biological woman, where are we?
I'd like to show you a photograph.
Are we not even allowed to?
Person, but I don't think we have one.
Ricky Valerie Collar. Ricky Valerie Collar, 22 years old.
The thing is, what's annoying to me is I just get really irritated at why the transgender movement are so hell-bent on getting into women's spaces.
That is actually my issue. This is a beauty pageant for women. If you want a beauty pageant for transgender women, have your own. Just create one, you know, and nobody's going to say anything.
This particular issue took a really dark turn at the weekend, Emma. This was a transgender activist. I'm pretty sure we must have the footage of this.
I think we have.
This was an activist who had actually served 30 years in jail for attempted murder, telling a crowd, this was a trans pride march, to punch a TERF in the face. Let's just watch this.
Oh.
We have no vision.
We don't have
either.
the vision. Well,
Sorry about that.
so just so people know what a TERF... So
trans exclusionary radical feminist. If you see a TERF, this transgender activist, I don't know whether to say man or woman anymore, transgender activist who has, as you say, been in prison for 30 years for attempted murder. What I don't understand, she said, if you see a TERF, punch them in the face.
In the effing face.
Yeah,
in
the face.
And was cheered and
so why
cheered
is
and
hate
cheered.
and this level of violence and aggression okay?
It's blatant.
What
incitement of hate? It cannot be condoned.
It should be illegal. And
Absolutely.
I think that person should be arrested.
100%.
Inciting violent and hatred.
It's a video that's gone viral. Everybody has seen it. And in any avenue, in any respect, we cannot accept things like that.
Doesn't it tell you about the protected status enjoyed by some transgender people, though, that they feel free to stand on a stage, know they're being filmed with a microphone, and tell others to punch women in the face?
It's absolutely shocking, isn't it?
It shows that they know they're not going to be arrested.
But are we too frightened to stand up and say this is completely
and
wrong?
the sort of person that person was talking about is J.K. Rowling, who speaks out in a very brave and principled way. The
Posey
Labour
Parker.
MP, what's her name? The Labour MP in...
Rosie Duffield. Rosie Duffield, sorry.
In Canterbury. These are people who are standing up for what they believe is, and yet this terrible person is saying, go and punch him in the face.
But it's the hate. It's the fact that we can't just discuss, you know, OK, so we have different opinions. We have different... We believe that, you know, biological women are women. It's the aggression and the rage,
and the
which
thing
I
is,
find
there
so
is a freedom.
disturbing.
There's a freedom for people to have an opinion on things, and you can say that. But then when that moves into the kind of territory of violence and aggression and real hate, especially when videos go viral, it's very dangerous for society. We need to have some barriers, some boundaries where somebody is stepping up and saying, we are not going to tolerate this, what's being done about it. And I feel like that voice is not loud enough.
How would you feel if a man had stood up at a Pride event and said, punch all women in the face? I would be appalled. It's exactly the same thing.
He would have been arrested.
Would have been arrested.
That's my view.
Especially if he was convicted.
But also...
You know, someone had been in prison for 3 decades.
But can you imagine if somebody stood up on stage and said, punch transgender people in the face, punch black people in the face, punch Jews in the face? But because it's just women, it seems like it's not really taken terribly seriously anymore. It feels like the position of women in this country and across the world, it feels almost, sometimes it feels worse than it's ever been. It is a feminist issue, Bushra, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it
We're
is.
being sidelined.
And it's sad, though, because, you know, when we have the rights of women and women speaking up, the whole point is protecting women, right? That's what it is. And when you have the transgender movement, who are a protected group at the moment, and we know that they are, which is fine, you know, there's certain levels that you do protect each other. But when it's this this violence towards women in any capacity, I just still do not understand why things are not being done about it, because this isn't the first time we've seen this happen.
And it's funny, I don't even think it's about protecting women, because I don't feel I need to be protected. I think it's about just reality and truth. I think that the reality of how we live and biological reality is being twisted into this very odd...
Doesn't this bring you now onto this extraordinary time?
We have to. Can I just say...
Would you describe
this cancer charity? Well, it's in the Times, but it's been all over the papers the last few days, and it goes on and on. A cancer charity is describing the female genitalia, the vagina, as they're saying we need to call it a bonus hole.
But this is specifically for trans people.
For trans men and, for trans people.
Hard to know what I suppose this would be in either.
I think this is really offensive to women, a bonus hole.
I mean, it's disgusting,
It's
really.
disgusting.
It's disgusting.
And it's anatomically incorrect.
Yeah.
It's confusing. It further kind of confuses everybody around
What is it, a game? What is it, like a bonus hole when you go to an entertainment park and you know, win something? Like, what is this?
We're sort of chuckling, but it's not funny.
It's not funny. It's awful. It's horrible. And these terms are becoming so normalised. Yeah. I feel like,
and
what is going on?
This is a charity.
But hold on, why is this necessary? Why is this necessary? Why would you call it a... This reminds me of teenage lads in the 90s who would call it like a glory hole. Yeah. They're also calling it a front hole. This is really, really odd and confusing. We have enough confusion around gender and sexuality and people's feelings and people's bodies and who's male and who's female. Why would we need to rename the female genitalia a bonus hole?
And the thing is,
where does it come from?
Sorry, Emma, this isn't even inclusive language. You know, this isn't inclusive language. This is offensive language to women. You know, and so we need to stand up. We need to have our voice and say, sorry, cancer charity, you cannot say that because this terminology is really offensive to us.
Every single person was born, except for caesarean, was born this way. We don't need to be silly about it.
It's not a bonus, it's entirely necessary. Shall we just look at what happened to George Osborne over the weekend, Emma? This was this person wasn't officially a Just Stop Oil protester.
Bit of orange confetti blast. Did it hurt him?
Threw orange confetti over George Osborne and his wife, who'd already had an interesting run-up to their wedding day, in that there had been a very vicious email that was released
to all of her guests,
detailing...
There it is. If you're watching, if you're listening on TV now, on the radio, this is George and his wife leaving the church. Somebody who's wearing an odd wig has chucked orange confetti over them.
That's a bloke in a wig.
Just Stop Oil say not them, but they nevertheless sympathise with what that person did. What do you think, Bushra?
I think it's childish and it's so disrespectful to go and ruin and destroy somebody's wedding day like that. I would hate for that to have happened to me. I get if people want to protest and they want to do something, but pick your moments. Yes. Don't do it on someone's wedding day. That's something that they want to cherish, and now it's literally been tarnished by this event. That's
quite scary as well, Emma. That's what struck me.
Well, they seem to get everywhere. I mean, there's a joke doing the rounds on Twitter about, you know, these Just Stop Oil people, they get front row tickets to Beyonce, they get Taylor Swift, they get Glastonbury. You know, how are they getting the tickets to all the big events, to the cricket? Yeah, exactly. Let's all join Just Stop Oil. But on a more serious note, you know, how did they get into George Osborne's wedding? It does seem very odd. I mean, it could have been worse. You know, the more realistic part of me.
When I first saw it, I thought it was paint. When I first saw the footage, and that would have been
very upsetting.
Awful.
But there'd have been a lot of security there because at least one former Prime Minister, David Cameron.
Yeah.
So how do
they get in? I'm going to say this. I find Just Stop Oil to be so cultist. It's becoming cultist. It's these groupies of gathering, and I think the momentum is picking up, and we need to.
Yeah.
We've run out of time, sadly.
Emma,
good to see you.
Bushra, thank you so much. We've come to the end of the show. It has flown by. We've packed a lot in. Coming up next is a live desk with Mark Longhurst and Pip Thompson. We'll be back with Britain's Newsroom tomorrow at 9:30. Have a great day.
See you then.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. We saw lots of showers over the weekend. There will be more to come today. In fact, some longer spells of rain too, and feeling quite fresh. And that's the picture for the next few days as well. Low pressure in charge of our weather, bringing showers and longer spells of rain. It doesn't go anywhere quickly for much of this week, really, keeping it fairly unsettled and cool. And yes, there is some sunshine first thing this morning, particularly across the north and the east, but towards the southwest we've got gathering clouds and outbreaks of rain. This is slowly going to push north and eastwards as we go through the day. Some of this rain could be heavy at times for parts of Wales into the Midlands, northwestern parts of England later as well. Elsewhere will generally be a case of sunshine and showers, and some of them will be heavy at times, possibly thundery too. Best of the sunshine towards the southeast, where we'll see highs approaching the mid-20s, feeling quite chilly under the cloud and rain. Into this evening, that rain pushes northwards and fragments into showers, but then towards the southwest we see further rain pushing into southern counties of England and Wales as we move overnight. Some of this will be heavy as well, and you can see further showers across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England too. So this will keep temperatures up, generally between 14 and 17 Celsius to take us into Tuesday morning. So it's a bit of an unsettled start. We have rain clearing eastwards across England and Wales, showers elsewhere, some of these heavy at times for parts of Scotland Northern Ireland, and then later on Northern England too. Some rumbles of thunder possible. A few glimmers of sunshine in between the showers, and feeling quite fresh, particularly around the west where it will be quite breezy. Temperatures in the high teens to low 20s across the UK, which is a little below average, particularly where we do have that strength of wind. Over the next few days, it does stay unsettled. Further showers, longer spells of rain, and temperatures generally on the cool side, reaching the low 20s at best towards the south and east.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.